Chapter 29 of Tante. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Dion Johns, Salt Lake City, Utah. Tante by Anne Douglas Sedgwick. Chapter 29. Karen sat in her corner of the railway carriage looking out at familiar scenery. Reading and the springtide beauties of the Thames Valley had gone by in the morning. Then, after the attendant had passed along the corridor announcing lunch, and those who were lunching had followed him in single file, had come the lonely majesty of the Somerset Downs, lying like great headlands along the plain, a vast sky of rippled blue and silver above them. They had passed Plymouth, where she had always used to look down from the high bridges and wonder over the lives of the midshipmen on the training ships, and now they were winding through wooded Cornish valleys. Karen had looked out of her window all day. She had not read, though kind Frau Lippheim had put the latest Tendes Roman, paper bound, into the little basket, which was also stocked with stout beef sandwiches, a bottle of milk, and the packet of chocolate and bun in paper bag that Franz had added to it at the station. Poor Franz! He and his mother had come to see her off, and they had both wept as the train moved away. And strange indeed it must have been for them to see the Karen Jardine who only yesterday had been apparently so happy and so secure in her new life, carried back to the old, a wife who had left her husband. Karen had slept little the night before, and kind Franz must have slept less, for he had given her his meagre bedroom, and spent the night on the narrowest, hardest, most slippery of sofas in the sitting-room of the Bayswater lodging-house, where Karen had found the Lippheims very cheaply, very grimly, not to say greasily, installed. It was no wonder that Franz's eyes had been so heavy, his face so puffed and pale that morning, and his tears had given the last touch of desolation to his countenance. Karen herself had not wept, either at the parting or at the meeting of the night before. She had told them, with no explanations at all, that she had left her husband and was going back to her guardian, and the Lippheims had asked no questions. It might have been possible that Franz, as he sat at the table, his fingers run through his hair, clutching his head, while he and his mother listened to her, was not so dazed and lost as was Frau Lippheim, who had not seen Gregory. Franz might have his vague perceptions. "Ach, ach," he had ejaculated once or twice while she spoke. And Frau Lippheim had only said, "Liebes Kind, liebes armes Kind." She was, after all, going back to the great Tante, and they felt, no doubt, that no grief could be ultimate which had that compensatory refuge. She was going back to Tante. As the valleys, in their deepened shadows, streamed past her, Karen remembered that it had hardly been at all of Tante that she had thought, while the long hours passed and her eyes observed the flying hills and fields. Perhaps she had thought of nothing. The heavy feeling, as of a stone resting on her heart, of doom, defeat, and bitterness, could hardly have been defined as thought. She had thought and thought and thought during these last dreadful days. Every mental cog had been adjusted. Every wheel had turned. She had held herself together as never before in all her life, in order to give thought every chance. For wasn't that to give him every chance? And wasn't that, above all, to give herself any chance that might still be left her? And now the machinery seemed to lie wrecked. There was not an ember of hope left with which to kindle its activity. How much hope there must have been to have made it work so firmly and so furiously during these last days. How much she hadn't known until her husband had come in last night and at last spoken openly. Even Mrs. Forrester's revelations, though they had paralyzed her, had not put out the fires. She had still hoped that he could deny, explain, recant, own that he had been hasty, perhaps mistaken, give her some loophole. She could have understood, oh, to a degree almost abject, his point of view. Mrs. Forrester had accused her of that, and Tante had accused her of it too. But no, it had been slowly to freeze to stillness, to hear his clear, cold utterance of shameful words, see the folly of his arrogance and his complacency, realize in his glacial look and glib, ironic smile that he was blind to what he was destroying in her. For he could not have torn her heart to shreds and then stood bland, unaware of what he had done, had he loved her. Her young spirit, unversed in irony, drank in the bitter draught of disillusion. They had never loved each other, or worse, far worse, they had loved, and love was this puny thing that a blow could kill. His love for her was dead. She still trembled when the ultimate realization surged over her, looking fixedly out of the window lest she should weep aloud. She had only one travelling companion, an old woman who got out at Plymouth. Karen had found her curiously repulsive, and that was one reason why she had kept her eyes fixed on the landscape. She had been afraid that the old woman would talk to her, perhaps offer her refreshments or sympathy, for she was a kind old woman, with bland eyes and a moist, warm face and 2 oily curls hanging forward from her old-fashioned bonnet upon her shoulders. She was stout, dressed in tight black cashmere, and she sat with her knees apart and her hands, gloved in grey thread gloves, lying on them. She held a handkerchief rolled into a ball, and from time to time, as if furtively, she would raise this handkerchief to her brow and wipe it. And all the time, Karen felt, she looked mildly and humbly at her and seemed to divine her distress. Karen was thankful when she got out. She had been ashamed of her antipathy. Bodmin Road was now past, and the early spring sunset shone over the tree tops in the valleys below. Karen leaned her head back and closed her eyes. She was suddenly aware of her great fatigue, and when they reached Gwynear Road she found that she had been dozing. The fresh, chill air, as she walked along the platform, waiting for the change of trains, revived her. She had not been able to eat her beef sandwiches, and the thought that so much of Frau Lippheim's good food should be wasted troubled her. She was glad to find a little wandering fox terrier who ate the meat eagerly. She herself, sitting beside the dog, nibbled at Franz's chocolate. She had had nothing on her journey but the milk and part of the bun which Franz had given her. Now she was in the little local train, and the bleak Cornish country, nearing the coast, spread before her eyes like a map of her future life. She began to think of the future, and of Tante. She had not sent word to Tante that she was coming. She felt that it would be easiest to appear before her in silence, and Tante would understand. There need be no explanations. She imagined that Tante would find it best that she should live permanently now in Cornwall with Mrs. Talcott. It could hardly be convenient for her to take about with her a wife who had left her husband. Karen quite realized that her status must be a very different one from that of the unshadowed young girl. And it would be strange to take up the old life again and to look back from it at the months of life with Gregory. That mirage of happiness, receding as if to a blur of light seen over a stretch of desert. Still, with her quiet and unrevealing young face turned towards the evening landscape, Karen felt as if she had grown very old and were looking back, after a lifetime without Gregory, at the mirage. How faint and far it would seem to be when she was really old, like a nebulous star trembling on the horizon. But it would never grow invisible. She would never forget it. Oh, never. Nor the dreadful pain of loss. To the very end of life, she was sure of it, she would keep the pang of the shining memory. When they reached Helston, dusk had fallen. She found a carriage that would drive her the 12 miles to the coast. It was a quiet, grey evening, and as they jolted slowly along the dusty roads and climbed the steep hills at a snail's pace, she leaned back too tired to feel anything any longer. And now they were out upon the moors where the gorse was breaking into flowers, and now over the sea she saw at last the great beacon of the Lizard lighthouse sweeping the country with its vast, desolate, yet benignant beam. They reached the long road and the stile where, a year before, she had met Gregory. Here was the hedge of fuchsia, here the tamarisks on their high bank, here the entrance to Les Solitudes. The steeply pitched grey roofs rose before her, and the white walls, with their squares of orange light, glimmered among the trees. She alighted, paid the man, and rang. A maid, unknown to her, came to the door, and showed surprise at seeing her there with her bag. Yes, Madame von Marwitz was within. Karen had entered with the asking. "Whom shall I announce, Madame?" the maid inquired. Karen looked at her vaguely. "She is in the music room? I do not need to be announced. That will go to my room." She put down the bag and crossed the hall. She was not aware of feeling any emotion, yet a sob had taken her by the throat, and tears had risen to her eyes. She opened them widely as she entered the dusky room, presenting a strange face. Madame von Marwitz rose from a distant sofa. In her astonishment she stood still for a moment. Then, like a great, white, widely winged moth, she came forward, rapidly, yet with hesitant, reconnoitering pauses, her eyes on the girl who stood in the doorway, looking blindly towards her. "Karen!" she exclaimed sharply. "What brings you here?" "I have come back to you, Tante," said Karen. Tante stood before her, not taking her into her arms, not taking her hands. "Come back to me? What do you mean?" "I have left Gregory," said Karen. She was bewildered now. What had happened? She did not know, but it was something that made it impossible to throw herself into Tante's arms and weep. Then she saw that another person was with them. A man was seated on the distant sofa. He rose, wandering slowly down the room, and revealed himself in the dim light that came from the evening sky and sea as Mr. Claude Drew. Pausing at some little distance, he fixed his eyes on Karen, and in the midst of all the impressions, striking like chill, moulding blows on the melted iron of her mood, she was aware of these large, dark eyes of Mr. Drew's, and of their intent curiosity. The predominant impression, however, was of a changed aspect in everything, and as Tante, now holding her hands, still stood silent, also looking at her with intent curiosity, the impression vaguely and terribly shaped itself for her as a piercing question. Was Tante not glad to have her back? There came from Tante in another moment a more accustomed note. "You have left your husband? Because of me? My poor child?" Karen nodded. Mr. Drew's presence made speech impossible. "He made it too difficult for you?" Karen nodded again. "And you have come back to me," Madame von Marwitz summed it up, rather than inquired. And then, after another pause, she folded Karen in her arms. The piercing question seemed answered, yet Karen could not now have wept. A dry, hard desolation filled her. "May I go to my room, Tante?" "Yes, my child, go to your room. You will find Tallie. Tallie is in the house, I think. Or did I send her into Helston? No, that was for tomorrow." She held Karen's hand at a stretch of her arm while she seemed, with difficulty still, to collect her thoughts. "But I will come with you myself. Yes, that is best. Wait here, Claude." This to the silent, dusky figure behind them. "Do not let me be a trouble." Karen controlled the trembling of her voice. "I know my way." "No trouble, my child, no trouble, or none that I am not glad to take." Tante had her now on the stair, her arm around her shoulders. "You will find us at 6s and 7s, a household hastily organized, but Tallie, directed by wires, has done wonders. So, my poor Karen, You have left him. For good? Or is it only to punish him that you come to me?" "I have left him for good." "So," Madame von Marwitz repeated. With all the veils and fluctuations, one thing was growing clear to Karen. Tante might be glad to have her back, but she was confused, trying to think swiftly, to adjust her thoughts. They were in Karen's little room, overlooking the trees at the corner of the house. It was dismantled. A bare dressing table, the ewer upturned in the basin, the bed and its piled bedding covered with a sheet. Madame von Marwitz sat down on the bed and drew Karen beside her. "But is that not to punish him too much?" "It is not to punish him. I cannot live with him any longer." "I see, I see," said Madame von Marwitz, with a certain briskness, as though, still, to give herself time to think. "It might have been wiser to wait for a little. I would have written to you. We could have consulted. It is serious, you know, my Karen, very serious, to leave one's husband. I went away so this should not come to you." "I could not wait. I could not stay with him any longer," said Karen heavily. "There is more, you mean? You had words? He hates me more than you thought?" Karen paused and then assented. "Yes, more than I thought." Above the girl's head, which she held pressed down on her shoulder, Madame von Marwitz pondered for some moments. "Alas," she then uttered in a deep voice, and Karen saying nothing, she repeated on a yet more melancholy note, "Alas." Karen now raised herself from Tante's shoulder, but at the gesture of withdrawal Madame von Marwitz caught her close again and embraced her. "I feared it," she said. "I saw it. I hoped to hide it by my flight. My poor child, my beloved Karen." They held each other for some silent moments. Then Madame von Marwitz rose. "You are weary, my Karen. You must rest. Is it not so? I will send Tallie to you. You will see Tallie. She is a perfection of discretion. You do not shrink from Tallie. And you need tell her nothing. She will not question you. Between ourselves, is it not so? Yes, that is best, for the present. I will come again later. I have guests, a guest, you see. Rest here, my Karen." She moved towards the door. Karen looked after her. An intolerable fear pressed on her. She could not bear, in her physical weakness, to be left alone with it. "Tante!" she exclaimed. Madame von Marwitz turned. "My child?" "Tante, you are glad to have me back." Her pride broke in a sob. She hid her face in her hands. Madame von Marwitz returned to the bed. "Glad, my child?" she said. "For all the sorrow that it means? And to know that I am the cause? How can I be glad for my child's unhappiness?" She spoke with a touch of severity, as though in Karen's tears she felt an unexpressed accusation. "Not for that," Karen spoke with difficulty, "but to have me with you again. It will not be a trouble?" There was a little silence, and then, her severity passing to melancholy reproof, Madame von Marwitz said: "Did we not, long since, speak of this, Karen? Have you forgotten? Can you so wound me once again? Only my child's grief can excuse her. It is a sorrow to see your life in ruins. I had hoped, before I died, to see it joyous and secure. It is a sorrow to know that you have maimed yourself, that you are tied to an unworthy man. But how could it be a trouble to me to have you with me? It is a consolation, my only consolation in this calamity. With me you shall find peace and happiness again." She laid her hand on Karen's head. Karen put her hand to her lips. "There, that is well," said Madame von Marwitz with a sigh, bending to kiss her. "That is my child. Tante is sad at heart. It is a heavy blow. But her child is welcome." When she had gone, Karen lay, her face in the billows of the bed, while she fixed her thoughts on Tante's last words. They became a sing-song monotone. "Tante is sad at heart, but her child is welcome. It is a heavy blow, but her child is welcome." After the anguish there was a certain ease. She rested in the given reassurance. Yet the sing-song monotone oppressed her. She felt presently that her hat, wrenched to one side and still fixed to her hair by its pins, was hurting her. She unfastened it and dropped it to the floor. She felt too tired to do more just then. Soon after this the door opened, and Mrs. Talcott appeared carrying a candle, a can of hot water, towels and sheets. Karen drew herself up, murmuring some vague words of welcome, and Mrs. Talcott, after setting the candle on the dressing table and the hot water in the basin, remarked: "Just you lie down again, Karen, and let me wash your face for you. You must be pretty tired and dirty after that long journey." But Karen put her feet to the ground. They just sustained her. "Thank you, Mrs. Talcott. I will do it," she said. She bent over the water, and while she washed, Mrs. Talcott, with deliberate skill, made up the bed. Karen sank in a chair. "You poor thing," said Mrs. Talcott, turning to her as she smoothed down the sheet. "Why, you're green. Sit right there and I'll undress you. Yes, you're only fit to be put to bed." She spoke with mild authority, and Karen, under her hands, relapsed to childhood. "This is all the baggage you've brought?" Mrs. Talcott inquired, finding a nightdress in Karen's dressing case. She expressed no surprise when Karen said that it was all, passed the nightdress over her head, and when she had lain down, tucked the bedclothes round her. "Now what you want is a hot water bottle and some dinner. I guess you're hungry. Did you have any lunch on the train?" "I've had some chocolate and a bun and some milk. Oh yes, I had enough," said Karen faintly, raising her hand to her forehead. "But I must be hungry, for my head aches so badly. How kind you are, Mrs. Talcott." "You lie right there and I'll bring you some dinner." Mrs. Talcott was swiftly tidying the room. "But what of yours, Mrs. Talcott? Isn't it your dinner time?" "I've had my supper. I have supper early these days." Karen dimly reflected, when she was gone, that this was an innovation. Whoever Madame von Marwitz's guests, Mrs. Talcott had, until now, always made an acte de présence at every meal. She was tired and not feeling well enough after her illness, she thought. Mrs. Talcott soon returned with a tray on which were set out hot consommé and chicken and salad, a peach beside them. Hot house fruit was never wanting when Madame von Marwitz was at Les Solitudes. "Lie back, I'll feed it to you," said Mrs. Talcott. "It's good and strong. You know Adolphe can make as good a consommé as anybody, if he's a mind to." "Is Adolphe here?" Karen asked as she swallowed the spoonfuls. "Yes, I sent for Adolphe to Paris a week ago," said Mrs. Talcott. "Mercedes wrote that she'd soon be coming with friends and wanted him. He'd just taken a situation, but he dropped it. Her new motor's here too, down from London. The chauffeur seems a mighty nice man, a sight nicer than Hammond." Hammond had been Madame von Marwitz's recent coachman. Mrs. Talcott talked on mildly while she fed Karen, who, in the whirl of trivial thoughts, turning and turning like midges over a deep pool, questioned herself, with a vague wonder that she was too tired to follow. "Did Tante say anything to me about coming to Cornwall?" Mrs. Talcott, meanwhile, as Madame von Marwitz had prophesied, asked no questions. "Now you have a good long sleep," she said, when she rose to go. "That's what you need." She needed it very much. The midges turned more and more slowly, then sank into the pool. Mist enveloped everything, and darkness. End of chapter 29.